The Sea of Okhotsk lies cold and iron-gray between the Kamchatka Peninsula and mainland Siberia, a wind-scoured basin Soviet admirals quietly refer to as our lake. In the spring of 1971, Admiral Viktor Sokolov stands inside Pacific Fleet headquarters in Vladivostok, studying wall charts veined with red ink. The markings show American submarine patrols, tidy, predictable arcs that stop precisely where Soviet waters begin. Sokolov's confidence is not bravado. It's geometry. The Okhotsk is a natural fortress. Ice seals its northern exits most of the year. The few southern straits funnel into narrow choke points layered with Soviet hydrophones, tuned to catch every propeller beat and pressure ripple. Any foreign submarine attempting entry would announce itself long before crossing the threshold. American boats are powerful, but noisy. Too noisy. A Sturgeon-class attack submarine announces its presence with the distinctive churn of a seven-bladed propeller, a mechanical signature Soviet sonar crews can trace from dozens of miles away. In these waters, sound carries like church bells. A single mistake, a moment too much speed, and the intruder would be boxed, tracked, and erased. Sokolov taps ash into a bronze tray molded in the shape of a submarine hull. Outside his window, Delta-class ballistic missile submarines ride quietly at their piers, missile hatches sealed over nuclear warheads capable of reaching the American west coast in minutes. These boats are the core of Soviet deterrence, hidden, protected, rehearsed to perfection. Inside the Okhotsk, the fleet trains without interference. Missile drills. Torpedo trials. Full-scale war games simulating strikes against Honolulu and San Diego. Nothing leaks. Nothing escapes. The secret is not just steel and sonar. It's cables. Thick, armored communications lines snake across the seafloor from Petropavlovsk to mainland command centers, hardwired arteries carrying patrol schedules, test data, and encrypted doctrine. They are Soviet-built, Soviet-laid, and guarded by patrol patterns no foreign vessel can penetrate without being noticed. The Americans, Sokolov knows, are clever. They have satellites that count hulls from orbit. Listening posts that vacuum radio traffic from half a continent away. Ocean-wide acoustic nets in the Atlantic. But this is different. Radio waves can be intercepted. Satellites can be fooled. Cables don't lie. The Okhotsk's depth makes diverse impossible. Its isolation keeps surface ships away. Its acoustic chaos prevents loitering submarines from hiding long enough to matter. Geography itself is the security system. Satisfied, Sokolov signs off on next month's missile exercise schedule and locks the folder inside his safe. Within hours, its contents will flow south through the Petropavlovsk cable, encrypted, invisible, untouchable. The Soviet Navy believes the equation is settled. Hunter. Fortress. Silence. What they do not know, what they cannot imagine, is that far beyond the horizon, a recording has already begun to play. Soviet doctrine says communications cables hug the coast. They stay shallow, accessible to repair ships, shielded by patrol craft and geography. Damage can be fixed quickly. Intrusions can be detected. Control is maintained. This cable ignores every rule. It cuts straight across the deepest basin of the Sea of Okhotsk, 40 miles from the nearest Soviet naval base at Petropavlovsk. No repair corridors mark its route. No patrol boats trace lazy circles overhead. It lies exposed in international waters, protected only by secrecy, and by the assumption that no foreign submarine would ever dare search for it here. Commander Ethan Hale studies the chart in the USS Halibut's control room. If this line truly links Petropavlovsk to mainland command centers, then it carries everything. Submarine patrol orders. Missile test schedules. Damage reports. Doctrine updates. Fleet-wide intelligence summaries. The entire Pacific Fleet's nervous system, pulsing day and night, lying quietly on the ocean floor. Hale orders deployment of the fish. In the aft compartment, technicians activate a custom-built camera sled, lowering it through a moon pool carved into halibut's belly. The tether hums softly as it pays out into darkness. Floodlights snap on, their beams slicing through water so cold and clear it feels unreal, like drifting through empty space. At 400 feet, the seafloor emerges. Gray silt. Scattered stone. And then, unmistakable. A thick black line runs across the bottom, smooth and deliberate, like a man-made scar. The cable. The camera makes multiple passes. No abrasion. No trawler damage. No anchor scars. Its insulation looks new, untouched. Electromagnetic sensors spike immediately, detecting dense, continuous data flow, bursts and surges consistent with encrypted voice traffic and teletype transmissions. The Soviets are using this cable right now. Issuing orders. Reporting results. Planning something. And they have no idea anyone is listening. Hale records everything: precise coordinates, depth, bearing, cable diameter. His pulse thuds in his ears. American intelligence has intercepted Soviet traffic before: radio chatter, microwave links, diplomatic calls, but never this. Never a direct artery into a fleet at war readiness. The Soviets built walls. They secured their waters. They encrypted their words. But they left the door unlocked. What lies at 400 feet will change Cold War espionage forever. 6 months later, Halibut returns. This time she carries something else. The device resembles a deep-sea coffin, 20 feet long, 6 tons of steel and secrecy. It costs more than most reconnaissance satellites and was assembled at Mare Island Naval Shipyard inside a locked hangar where every technician holds top-secret clearance and understands only their own piece of the puzzle. The pod is designed to survive 200 atmospheres of pressure. It can operate autonomously for a full year, no maintenance, no surfacing, no human contact. The technology inside borders on impossible. Traditional wiretaps require cuts, splices, disturbances that trigger alarms. This does none of that. Instead, the pod uses inductive coupling, electromagnetic collars that wrap around the cable and red signal leakage as faint magnetic fields. No damage. No interruption. The cable functions exactly as before. The Soviets notice nothing. Through external cameras, Hale watches divers descend in bulky atmospheric suits, moving slowly in near-freezing water. Their closed-circuit rebreathers hiss mechanically, leaving no bubbles to betray them. One diver locks the inductive collar around the cable, tightening it until the sensors engage. Another drives anchor pilings into the soft seabed, securing the pod in place. The activation sequence lasts 40 minutes. Internal power systems, miniature reactors no larger than paint cans, spin up to operating temperature. Magnetic recording heads align. Tape reels begin their endless loop. The pod is alive. The divers double-check every connection, then vanish upward into Halibut's moon pool. Hale orders a silent withdrawal. As the submarine slips away, the device remains behind, alone in the darkness, listening. Every conversation between Pacific Fleet headquarters and Moscow flows through that cable. Admirals debate deployments. Engineers report missile test results. Intelligence officers analyze American movements. Encryption doesn't matter. The pod records raw signal, every pulse, every fluctuation, storing it all for retrieval months later. NSA cryptographers will break the codes back home. That can wait. For now, the pod listens. And remembers. Month after month, data accumulates. Delta-class submarines receive patrol orders. Departure times. Patrol boxes. Missile launch schedules stream past, revealing exactly when Soviet rockets will rise from Kamchatka test ranges. The fortress still stands. The doctrine updates tell the story first. They explain how Soviet submarines would react to a NATO first strike. Which choke points would be defended to the last torpedo. Which sea lanes would be sacrificed without hesitation? Which commanders were authorized to break radio silence, and which were not? For American analysts, it is an intelligence windfall beyond imagination. Pacific-based U.S. submarines begin sailing with a confidence that borders on arrogance. They know Soviet patrol corridors weeks in advance. NATO naval exercises adjust course and timing with uncanny precision, sidestepping Soviet boats they shouldn't even know exist. Reconnaissance satellites are tasked with surgical accuracy, focusing on specific bases at specific hours, because the cable has already whispered when something important will happen. And the Soviets see nothing. The communications remain encrypted. The cable shows no damage. Hydrophone arrays detect no foreign presence lingering near Petropavlovsk. The lake remains private. The fortress remains intact. Admiral Sergei Gorshkov continues signing operational orders with the calm assurance of a man convinced his secrets are sealed inside steel and ice. Meanwhile, the pod keeps listening. Every patrol order. Every test authorization. Every quiet correction sent from Moscow to the Pacific Fleet. By the time the Soviets begin to sense something is wrong, the Americans have already memorized their playbook. The first warning arrives in August 1973, not as proof, but as discomfort. A Delta-class ballistic missile submarine departs Petropavlovsk for an Arctic patrol and encounters an American Los Angeles-class attack submarine positioned exactly along its classified transit corridor. Not nearby. Not coincidentally close. Directly astride the route Soviet doctrine mandates for strategic submarines. The incident is logged as coincidence. Then it happens again. And again. In November, a missile test from Kamchatka draws American reconnaissance aircraft that arrive 30 minutes before launch. Cameras are powered. Tracking systems are aligned. Every phase of the flight is captured cleanly from ignition to burnout. Soviet counterintelligence reconstructs the timeline. Satellites couldn't have seen the preparations. Cloud cover masked the site for 3 straight days. There was no radio chatter to intercept. They shouldn't have known. But they did. Captain second rank Alexei Morozov sits inside GRU headquarters in Moscow, chain-smoking Belomorkanal cigarettes while incident files pile higher on his desk. Patterns emerge that refuse to be dismissed. American submarines appear where doctrine says they shouldn't. NATO exercises dodge patrols before those patrols deploy. Fleet assessments written in Vladivostok seem reflected in Washington before they even reach Moscow. The hunt for a traitor begins. 200 Pacific Fleet personnel with access to classified communications fall under surveillance. Phones are tapped. Mail is opened. Families are questioned under the polite fiction of routine security checks. Apartments are searched for hidden radios, microcameras, cipher sheets, anything that might suggest contact with Western intelligence. They find nothing. No spy. No mole. No human failure. So Morozov turns to machines. Cryptographers at the 8th Directorate spend months attacking their own systems, running millions of test messages through every cipher in use. They search for mathematical flaws, implementation errors, theoretical vulnerabilities. The verdict is unanimous. The codes are solid. Unbreakable. Decades ahead of available computing power. Then satellites are blamed. American orbital platforms can count hulls, measure shadows, track departures, but they cannot read orders. They cannot hear underwater conversations. They cannot predict intent weeks in advance. The explanation doesn't fit. Paranoia spreads. Gorshkov orders constant change. Communication protocols rotate monthly. Patrol routes randomize. Code words replace proper names. Some submarines receive orders via couriers carrying one-time pads, an operational nightmare that slows response times and fractures coordination. American insight remains razor-sharp. By 1976, theories grow desperate. Perhaps American submarines have achieved propulsion so silent they can loiter undetected in the Okhotsk for weeks. Perhaps the CIA has recruited someone at the highest levels of naval command. Perhaps the Americans have stumbled into psychic research, remote viewing, extrasensory perception, a way to see through oceans and steel. Morozov crushes another cigarette and stares at the gray expanse of the Okhotsk pinned to his office wall. The answer is there. Somewhere beneath that water. What he cannot imagine is that the truth flows past him every day, electromagnetic pulses bleeding through insulation, whispering into machines that should not exist, buried beneath a fortress that never thought to guard its own veins. The mystery ends not with detection, but with betrayal. On January 14, 1980, Ronald Pelton walks into the Soviet embassy on 16th Street in Washington, D.C. He wears a suit nicer than his finances allow and carries desperation heavier than his briefcase. 38 years old, recently fired from the National Security Agency, he is drowning in $65,000 of debt from a failed real estate gamble. The Marine Guard assumes he's another amateur, one of several Americans each month offering gossip for cash. Pelton asks to speak with the KGB. They take him to a dim room that smells of stale cigarettes and furniture polish. Two men in cheap suits sit across a wooden table, faces blank, eyes sharp. Pelton talks. He spent 14 years inside NSA's A Group, Soviet Signals Intelligence. He held clearances that granted access to compartmented programs few people on Earth knew existed. He understands collection methods, operational details, technical capabilities worth billions. The officers barely react, until Pelton says one name. Operation Ivy Bells. The room changes. Pelton describes the cable in the Sea of Okhotsk with clinical precision. Its route. Its depth. The recording pod. The inductive tap. The reason American submarines always seem to know. For the first time, the Soviets hear the truth spoken aloud. Their private lake was never private. Their fortress was never sealed. And for nearly a decade, the Americans had been listening to their heartbeat. Pelton talks for nearly 2 hours without pause. He explains the inductive coupling, how the tap never cut the cable, never disrupted service, never triggered alarms. He describes the retrieval cycles, the submarines that returned months later to collect the tapes, the analysts waiting at NSA headquarters to break the encryption after the fact. He knows which cables were targeted, how long the taps remained active, and exactly what categories of intelligence were harvested. 9 years of America's deepest naval secret is emptied onto a wooden table in a single afternoon. The Soviets pay him $35,000 in cash. Enough to slow the bleeding. Not enough to free him. They want more, names of NSA personnel, outlines of other collection programs, cryptographic techniques still in use. Pelton agrees to everything. His hands tremble slightly as he counts crisp $100 bills that smell faintly of leather and ink. He comes back. Again and again. Over the next 5 years, Pelton returns to the embassy 4 more times. Each visit brings fragments of classified knowledge traded for money that vanishes into mortgages, credit cards, overdue notices. The KGB officers remain polite, distant, efficient. He is not a comrade. He is inventory. They pay him $273,000 in total, enough to stabilize his life, never enough to change it. Then, on his second visit, Pelton hands over something that alters everything. A photograph. The image shows a long, cylindrical object anchored to the seafloor, wrapped around a thick black cable like a mechanical leech. The photograph no longer exists physically, it comes from a classified NSA briefing slide Pelton once saw. He recreated it from memory, sketching it with such accuracy that Soviet naval engineers instantly recognized the design. More importantly, they recognized the location. Within 48 hours, the report reaches Pacific Fleet headquarters. Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, now 70 years old and nearing retirement, reads it slowly. His hands shake, not from age alone. The fortress was never breached by satellites. Not by codebreakers. Not by traders inside the fleet. It was breached by divers. American divers, descending into Soviet-controlled waters, wrapping electromagnetic sensors around Soviet cables, listening silently while the Pacific Fleet transmitted its most sensitive secrets straight into American machines. Years of paranoia. Endless investigations. Protocol changes that crippled operations. All of it misdirection. The enemy had been sitting on the ocean floor the entire time. Within a week, Soviet recovery teams deploy. A specially equipped submarine tender sails for the coordinates, carrying divers, cameras, cutting tools, and lifting gear. This time, they know exactly what they are looking for, and exactly how badly they have been compromised. The photograph Pelton delivered ends the most successful naval intelligence operation in history. Operation Ivy Bells was engineering at the absolute edge of possibility. Designing a device capable of surviving a year on the seafloor while continuously recording encrypted communications meant solving problems that defeated most defense contractors. Every component had to function flawlessly in an environment more hostile than low Earth orbit, crushing pressure, near-freezing temperatures, corrosive saltwater, and total isolation. At the heart of the system were the inductive coils. Traditional wiretaps cut into cables, leaving physical evidence. Ivy Bells did not. Electrical current flowing through copper generates faint electromagnetic fields that bleed through insulation. The coils wrapped around the cable like a blood pressure cuff, detecting those fields with enough precision to reconstruct the original signal. The physics were simple. The execution was brutal. Ocean currents could shift the pod by inches over time. Tectonic movement and thermal expansion subtly altered cable position. Any misalignment degraded the signal, turning clear communications into noise. Engineers solved this with a self-adjusting hydraulic clamp system, constantly regulating pressure to maintain perfect contact without deforming the insulation. Too loose, the signal faded. Too tight, the cable compressed, risking detection by Soviet maintenance crews. Then came power. Batteries capable of running the system for a year would weigh more than a school bus. Instead, engineers turned to miniature nuclear reactors, radioisotope thermoelectric generators using plutonium-238 decay. The same technology powered deep space probes like Voyager, but space did not exert 200 atmospheres of pressure. The RTGs were sealed inside titanium housings, welds inspected under electron microscopes, then crushed in pressure chambers simulating depths far beyond the Okhotsk Basin. Nothing could fail. Finally, storage. In 1971, magnetic tape measured capacity in megabytes. Ivy Bells needed to record continuously for months, an ocean of data by the standards of the era. Engineers built custom multi-reel systems, synchronized heads, and automatic tape cycling mechanisms that could run unattended in darkness for a year. And they worked. Until one man walked into an embassy and sold the truth. The fortress did not collapse in battle. It was never stormed. It simply realized, far too late, that someone had been listening the entire time. The original installation had taken 8 hours in water cold enough to kill exposed flesh in minutes, while Soviet patrol boats traced lazy orbits 40 miles away, unaware of what was happening beneath them. Temperature was the enemy. The Sea of Okhotsk's bottom water hovers just above freezing, cold enough to turn conventional electronics brittle, to alter resistance values, to fracture solder joints without warning. Every circuit board inside the pod had to perform identically at 34 degrees Fahrenheit as it did during heat-soaked tests in the Nevada desert. Engineers had spent months cycling components through brutal temperature swings, compressing years of environmental stress into weeks. Heat. Cold. Heat again. Failures were catalogued, redesigned, eliminated. The pressure housings were carved from single billets of steel, not assembled, not welded, machined whole. 3-inch thick walls. Seals rated far beyond operational depth. Each housing was scanned ultrasonically, technicians searching for microscopic voids that could blossom into fatal cracks under pressure. One flaw would mean instant flooding. Instant loss. And unmistakable evidence of American intrusion scattered across the Soviet seafloor. Every solved problem made the device harder to find. Every improvement made it quieter. On October 18, 1981, the reckoning arrives. A specially outfitted Soviet submarine tender reaches the coordinates under low clouds and gray seas. Diesel fumes cling to the air as remotely operated vehicles descend through dark water toward the bottom. Captain First Rank Alexei Suvorov stands on the rolling deck, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the monitors. He has studied Pelton's sketch until he can draw it from memory. He knows the estimated dimensions. The weight. The anchoring system. Still, nothing prepares him. The cameras clear the silt, and the pod emerges. It sits on the seabed like a mechanical predator, perfectly balanced, impossibly clean. Its titanium skin throws back the floodlights with mirror-like brightness. The inductive collar embraces the Soviet cable with surgical precision, hydraulic clamps pristine, untouched by corrosion despite months in salt water. The anchoring pylons disappear into the mud, placed with geometric exactness. This is not sabotage. This is craftsmanship. Suvorov watches in silence as the camera circles the device 3 full times. No markings. No serial numbers. No manufacturer stamps. Nothing that can be traced, only intent made metal. This was never improvisation. This was design at the highest level. Millions of dollars. Thousands of engineering hours. Years of planning, executed flawlessly. Recovery begins. Divers descend in atmospheric suits, their movements slow and deliberate. They disengage the inductive collar, careful not to disturb the cable. Photographs are taken from every angle. Measurements recorded. Notes spoken aloud for transcription. Lifting cables are attached to reinforced hardpoints welded directly into the pod's frame. When the crane engages, steel groans under the load. The pod breaks free of the seabed reluctantly, as if resisting discovery. Water pours from its surfaces as it breaches, dripping secrets back into the sea. On deck, Soviet engineers gather around it in stunned silence. They do not cheer. They do not speak. They simply stare. Because in that moment, the truth becomes unavoidable. For nearly a decade, the Pacific Fleet did not operate in secrecy. It operated on a stage. Every confident order. Every classified patrol route. Every simulated nuclear strike. All of it had been overheard. The pod is sealed and shipped inland under heavy guard. Analysts will dismantle it bolt by bolt, studying solutions they never imagined were possible. Lessons will be learned. Doctrines rewritten. Trust shattered. But nothing can undo what has already been taken. The Sea of Okhotsk remains cold and gray. The cables still run beneath it. The submarines still patrol. Only now, the illusion is gone. The fortress was never breached by force. It was listened to. And by the time it realized the silence wasn't real. The war of secrets had already been lost.